the authority of this act shall be deemed as United States money. And 2, it shall be unlawful for any person to designate any credit, note, bond, script, it should be scrip without the T, or other financial instrument as United States money. Sorry, folks, you're not the rightful issuers of your own promissory obligations, even if the federal government could rightly impose the cost upon you for what you consume of all our production in some way other than what is the restrictive and explicit implementation of an actual natural promissory obligation to retire principal at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the related property, which is the only thing that can maintain the integrity of the currency. I don't have words for how poor a job and how pretentious this preposterous bill is. I'm just going to catch a couple other points here and we'll just call it done with this thing. And this is garbage. Here on page 21, under Title 3, Reconstitution of the Federal Reserve System is the title of this section of this preposterous bill. Section 301, Reconstitution of the Federal Reserve. Government acquisition of all net assets of Federal Reserve System. On the effective, I'm laughing at the grammar. On the effective date, the Secretary shall purchase on behalf of the United States all net assets in the shall purchase on behalf of the United States. You know, I ask, and I'm not going to answer this question because, you know, this would give a plagiarist leeway to escape with his preposterous, imitation here. Why are you purchasing on behalf of the United? Purchasing. You've already paid for every asset of the Federal Reserve System. You've already paid for it. Why are you purchasing on behalf of the United States all net assets in the Federal Reserve System, including the Federal Reserve banks, according to the rules specified by the Federal Reserve Act? Why are you purchasing that? What does that solve? What are the consequences of it? What is the impact on the circulation? Why is it right to develop a volume of circulation in such a manner? Why are you purchasing? Why are you purchasing? There's not not even the least attempt to qualify why here. So how could we understand why we would be purchasing such things in such a manner, even if it's merely, purportedly, merely by spending money into circulation? Here on page 24, line 19, another example of this preposterous bill. 5, governing principle of monetary policy. This is the governing principle, supposedly. It's not a principle at all. It's a statement of a goal. It's not a principle of how the goal is achieved, which goal is achieved by mathematically perfected economy and mathematically perfected economy only. He says this governing principle of monetary policy is, quote, the monetary authority shall pursue a monetary policy, undefined, based on the governing principle, so it says, that the supply of money in circulation should not become inflationary nor deflationary in and of itself. Well, what's the principle? How is that done? I mean, that's a goal. It's not a principle. The principle is how that's accomplished. In other words, the only way to accomplish it, a creation of a monetization of our production, is to issue a promissory obligation where the consumer pays for the production at the rate of consumption or depreciation. That's the only thing that, without undue cost, monetizes and perfectly tokenizes all of our wealth in an immutable manner. That and nothing else accomplish the actual purposes. That's the principle. That's the thing which delivers this goal of pursuing a monetary policy based on the purported governing principle that the supply of money in circulation should not become inflationary nor deflationary in and of itself. Mathematically perfected economy accomplishes that purpose even without any regulation. How? Simply by the obligatory schedule of payment, because that and that alone maintains a circulation which at all times is equal to the remaining value of represented wealth. I'm going to skip ahead here to near the end of this bill, because it falls any such proposition falls down on one flaw, and this is nothing but preposterous, amateurish pretension here. Anyway, on page 43, line 13, section 502, interest rate ceilings. Here we are, back to Steven Zarlenga and his purported Chicago plan, which couldn't have saved us. Limit on amount of financing fees. The total amount of interest charged by a financial institution on any extension of loans, other than a mortgage, it says in parentheses, to any individual borrower through amortization. Here you have, he's advocating the very obfuscation of the currency, which is our problem. Pretending to solve all these things, advocating the very thing which causes all these things. This is ridiculous. Interest rate ceilings, as if some ceiling on interest rates has ever saved us. There is a difference between usury and interest, and you've somehow defined it as 8%. Other people at other times had it at 6%. It's vacillated all over history owing to this obfuscation of the currency, which you're advocating here. We're not borrowing money, we're issuing promissory obligations, which are obligations to pay and retire principal. The real creditor is paid in full, the person who accepts our promissory obligation for property that they give up. Our obligation is to pay for that property and that alone, and to do so at an obligatory schedule of payment which retires principal from circulation at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the related property. Retires it from circulation. It is the property of no one. We are not borrowing money into circulation. And interest is terminal. And this preposterous bill, which only purports to solve all the things which it, like the Federal Reserve Act, in turn can only cause it, it's just moving banking over to federal government. It's a private enterprise now for the purpose of exploitation. It's been imposed upon us. Why move it to federal government as if it's actually serving the people? And particularly if this isn't subjected to public assent by a knowledgeable public which understands that interest, any rate of interest, which has to be reborrowed to maintain a vital circulation, requires borrowing principal and interest back into circulation as new debts, new sums of debts, which inherently and irreversibly increase, therefore, so much as periodic interest on an ever greater sum of debt. This is preposterous. And then he goes on to state, limit on rate. The annual percentage rate application to any loan of money may not exceed 8% on unpaid balances, including of all charges. Well, inclusive of all charges. Well, this is childish. It's, in truth to me, it's incredibly disgusting. But if this 8%, just focus on that one thing right there. 8%. Interest shall not exceed 8%, he's just said. Where did you get this 8% number? Did you do a model, for instance? Did you find that 8% wouldn't multiply artificial indebtedness in proportion, which isn't even a debt to this pretended creditor, which you're now going to make the federal government? You know, do you have some process by which you determine that 8%, not 7.25%, not 8.375%, not 5.212%, 8% is this round number, 8% somehow, serves our purposes? Why are we paying this interest at all? Why isn't zero correct? How indeed then can this preposterous bill solve anything? Let's move on then to Ron Paul's proposal here, which is announced in the article that I'm going to read here, a little bit of Hill's Floor Action blog. Ron Paul proposes currency competition in bid to end federal monopoly on money. This article is dated March 16th, 2011. Representative Ron Paul, Republican of Texas, on Tuesday said he would soon introduce the Free Competition in Currency Act, which would dismantle what he described as the federal government's self-proclaimed monopoly on legal tender in the U.S. and allow states and private enterprises to issue their own currency. Well, how are all these disparate propositions, which are merely designed to appeal to emotional whim, as if, they can't appeal to rationale, because if they were so constructed, even they would qualify their propositions. This isn't even an approach, to call this the Need Act and say it solves all these things when it's imposing higher rates of interest than we're paying now, even. To just claim that you're accomplishing what are objects that you're merely imitating of something which is solution, and you're subverting our opportunity to evaluate that solution properly by inserting yourself in the equation. Is no, listen to this, my need bill. See, it will solve all these things by 8% interest rates. Well, this is just a bunch of crap, and this is more crap here from Ron Paul. Representative Paul on Tuesday said he would soon introduce the, quote, Free Competition in Currency Act, unquote. Well, let's think about just that much of this proposition so far. Free Competition in Currency Act. If we have a currency which serves our purposes, or we have a prescription for currency which would serve our purposes, how is it that we might determine that anything else might be commingled with that and still serve our purposes? That idea itself is absolutely preposterous. Worse, being as different currencies would inherently represent different tokenizations and or ramifications. How is it that they are even to be considered mutually interchangeable? For indeed, they can't be. So why at all would you introduce a proposition of ostensibly competing currencies if you understood what objects have to be accomplished by the only means which can accomplish them? The only reason that